Greetings and welcome to another River Radio Sports Central podcast alongside Matt Varney from 103.5 ESPN. I am Darren Kinnard, and Matty V, we took last week off. You get into the summertime, a little vacation, catch up on some things around the house, that type of thing. Not if you're a high school athlete or coach.
No.
It went immediately in the end of baseball season, and now we're full bore into summer.
That's right. So you've got shootouts going on. I mean, tonight we've got the SI Select softball game going on, recording on Thursday morning. There's still a lot going on, obviously, and we got to rest a little bit, but at the same time, you see things still going on, and it never ends. It's a year-round cycle. I mean, I talked to Murfreesboro, one of their ADs, Derek Beard, just a few weeks ago, and I hadn't asked him the question, but it was asked. You get to rest now, and even I've heard about the Carterville and how they're like we're right into it. He said, me and Jeremy Marshall, we take our vacation days basically in June, but we're not. We've got signings, we got this, we got that. It's just a never ending system. It's year round.
Yeah, and the one thing that's changed this year is that everybody will have a dead week surrounding the 4th of July. So next week will be the last week of pre-dead week activities. Yeah. And then usually the way that has worked in the past, that June has kind of been the basketball month.
That's right.
I mean, it doesn't mean that there aren't workouts or weightlifting or things of that nature, but June has been the basketball month, and then July is, you get more into football, the fall sports, and volleyball and those type of things. I'm interested to see how this is going to work, because there was always that dead week before the fall practices started. That's out of the equation.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, are teams just going to go ahead and start practicing that second week of July? Or how's this going to work?
I mean, it's all crashing into each other. That's the thing that we talked about when they made the change. Is it's all going to crash into each other now, and you think these kids are exhausted now. Just give them the rest of the summer. But it does kind of feel that way, that you're going to be going into practice as soon as July starts. I remember when I was in high school, it wasn't technically football practice, but it was camp to get the foundation basically ready. So then when practice started in early August, that it was like, all right, we're installing the playbook, and it's this and that, and you went through your bread and butters in July, and that was about it. But now, with the way that everything's set up, it may be that by the end of July you've got half your playbook installed, and you're just waiting to be told you can hit. And so it's going to be interesting. We're going to obviously be paying attention, but I feel like it's going to be different.
Yeah, no doubt. And of course, the season starts earlier. It starts with what used to be week 0. One of the things that we did get clarification on, we had talked about this in a previous podcast, is you practice all summer.
Yep.
And then when the official practice starts, they have to do the heat acclimatization. And I talked to, some of the area athletic trainers and stuff, and the rationale there is that the summer is technically voluntary. Yeah. And there can't be the assumption that everybody is there. So everybody has to go back to the same starting point. And even though you were supposed to do the heat acclimatization here at the start of whatever summer workout you're doing, and once you get to that official time when practice can start, then you've got to do the so it feels wonky, and it's like, why are we doing this? We've been practicing all summer, but that again, those are considered voluntary practices, and I know that's one of those things that gets thrown about, but contact days are not mandatory, unofficially.
Right. Yeah.
So that's where that goes. So even though we're going to see practices, there will be a point in time where that calendar flips to August, that it's going to have to revert back to, okay, well, we're, just, shirt and shorts, and no helmet. And then we'll add things that we've been using all summer.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's some pros to that as well, where you might be able to get a little bit more attention because, the helmet, when you have that helmet on, you've got the blinders on, but also it's really easy to kind of get in your head a little bit and I just want to hit. I just want to, when the helmet's off, you can kind of take it a little bit more from an academic standpoint of, I got to pay attention. First of all, the coaches see the eyes better without the helmet on,
right.
and so they know who's paying attention, who's not. It can be used in a positive way, but it's up to each coaching staff to figure out how to actually make that work. And so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of these kids are going to be getting really used to the classroom in the first 5-6 weeks of the unofficial season, really.
And I think it's also going to be interesting to see. It's going to be on each individual school.
Yeah.
When this all came about, I know there were some schools that said, "Hey, look, we're still going to take that week off before the official practice," and I think that's important because otherwise you're starting that second week of July. And, you're going practices, and it's not just for the players, it's for the coaches. Right. And, look, if there's not a break, we're going to see a lot of burnout.
And I think that's how it's going to start. But the question, and we talked about this a few months ago, just the question is, it just takes one domino. It takes one team to say, we're going to just go right through that old dead week because we're not required to anymore.
Right.
And they don't even have to win a state championship. It just has to be someone that maybe wins a playoff game.
Right.
Says, well, if we didn't have that week, who knows if we would have won that playoff game? Who knows if we would have been in the playoffs? And so it takes one, and then all of a sudden, maybe it's not anyone around here. Maybe it's someone in Central or Chicago. And so then, now all their conference foes are sitting there saying, well, they had that extra week, so now we got to take that extra week. And then all their non-conference foes are saying, well, they had that. And so it may not get to Southern Illinois for a bit of time, but it's going to permeate. And so within a decade, at the very most, I would say almost everyone's going to say, we have it. We might as well use it. The question will be, how do you use it when that time does come? Because, you don't want the burnout, like you mentioned. You don't want anyone getting hurt or anything like that. So it'll be interesting, and I think a lot of schools will use it in different ways, and that'll be the really interesting part. And what will be the most successful way? That's a good question. I would say use it as a film week more than anything. This is what we did well last year. This is what we didn't do well. This is what we got to improve on. Next week, this is where our focus is going to be because we didn't do well on this. And so it'll be interesting to see, but I wouldn't be surprised if some go as physical as they possibly can too.
Well, and there's such FOMO in athletics, but it's not just athletics, it's just kind of where we are in life.
Mm-hmm.
You think about, just using the retail cycle. You never saw anybody open, any businesses open on Thanksgiving. Right. Well, then you had a couple that did stay open, and now the others are going like, hey, why are we going to let them get all the money? And so we want to get some of that. And so then all of a sudden you've got more and more retailers open on days that they haven't been in the past. And again, that's, just a kind of a real world example of this, what you were talking about. Hey, they're practicing, and, I don't want them to get ahead of us. Right. So by golly, we've got to practice. Yeah. And so that will be interesting to carry out. The other thing in the past couple of weeks, the IHSA sent out the full guidelines on the shot clock, which is coming this season for boys and girls basketball. Some of the interesting caveats to the rule was, number one was if your school is not equipped for the shot clock, you've got to find a place that is. Right. And if you can't, then the other team has the ability to become the host if they have, they have a shot clock. And if nothing happens, you can't find a place, then the team that was originally supposed to host was forfeit, would forfeit. And the other thing that I just found kind of interesting was that it's not going to be mandatory at the lower levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's curious to me because and I think they're trying to balance the extra cost factor with, you're going to have to pay somebody else to run the clock, and just whether it's, a financial cost or whether it's a people cost. But at the same point, if you're doing it, you need to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So exactly. I don't know.
I mean, you need to prepare these kids to be ready for varsity, and that's going to be part of it. And since it's not mandatory, I guess you could sit there and say, for the lower levels, not even 35 seconds, it's 40 seconds. I don't know. So it's an interesting thing. I haven't had a chance to really dig into it because it came in while I was on vacation. So I saw it and I was like, cool, great. I'll read that later, and I still haven't gotten to it. But yeah. I mean, the other big aspect of it, and when this first came out a few years ago, we talked about this, just about the fact that, how can you, especially some of these smaller schools, especially around us, and of course upstate as well, but around us especially, that may not be able to afford to install one. How can you sit there and basically say that, well, you got to figure it out, and if you don't, then sorry, you forfeit. I would not be surprised if we see a couple of those situations this year in our area. I don't know of all the basketball gyms in the area if everyone's been able to outfit themselves. If there is one that hasn't yet, I would not be surprised. You've got a couple months to get ready for it, obviously, but those are not cheap. Those things are not cheap. And then, as you mentioned, the added cost of finding someone to run it and then paying that person. These people deserve to be paid, even if it's $10 or hey, we ordered you a pizza, some way. They deserve to be paid for their time. And so you add that added cost on in there, and it may not be nearly as much as the hardware itself, but nonetheless, once you get that, you're now looking through the budget and be like, well, we paid for it, but we used all the money for
right.
it.
If you have an underclass tournament or something,
yeah.
But and again, it goes down to that person running the shot clock becomes the single most important person
Absolutely.
at the table, and that used to be the official scorer. And I'm not downplaying the official scorer in any role, but at the end of the day, the shot clock has much more effect because again, we are used to seeing the shot clock on TV.
Yes.
And these games, that whether it's college or pro that we watch, they have the ability to go to the monitor and to check out, was there a touch? Was there not? Where should the shot clock be? That's not happening. Mm-mm. That is not. I mean, that is not on the table for anything. And so it's going to be different. It's going to have to be run by somebody that is, dependable and that you can, because not every school even has that dependable person for the home book. And, I was thinking this morning because, is there really the place for the official book anymore? Because you think about in the spring.
Yeah.
There's not an official book for baseball or softball. There's been some discussions about things, but at the end of the day, the home team does things, and the visiting team does things, and again, you would, if there's a controversy, you would compare and well, why isn't that the case with this? And again, I don't know if it's going to be. I mean, because look, that shot clock person, there is going to be a spotlight on that person, and we've seen it in college and pro, and and when there's a mistake, I mean the coach goes and anyway, it just there's going to be a lot of pressure, and it's going to be people that you have to be able to trust, that are not only going to stay paying attention and locked in, but people that understand the rules and what we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the shot clock, based on what I've seen the past couple of years, I don't think that the play is going to be affected as much as people think it's going to be. I don't think it will affect games in the way that a lot of people assume it will. I think a lot of teams are going to speed up a little bit. I think that they're not going to have a chance to run it back. That's the biggest thing. It's you get maybe one or two chances to run your play. It's not there. Okay, well, we got to chuck up a shot type of deal. That's about the only change you're going to see. But in terms of the behind-the-scenes stuff, as we're talking about, it's going to be a massive change. You might, at some schools, have to say, we got to sacrifice someone at the table because, well, first of all, you may not have enough room at the table. But the other side of it is, okay, what do we need to be able to make sure that this game counts? And you need the shot clock. And, well, do you need the official book? Not really. You can say someone over on the bench, if you want to keep a book, go ahead, type of deal. Media that's there, we'll grab it from them, something like that. It's not as nearly important. And do you need the person running the music? I know they're doing a lot of other stuff, but they're going to sit there and say, what role can we cut to make sure that this game counts. Some schools are going to have to do that. The schools that don't have to, they're blessed, they're lucky, and that's great. You get to keep your whole production element, you get to keep everything you've been doing, and you're just adding this other part to the game. But there's going to be some schools that sit there that 1A schools definitely will have that question to ask. There might be a couple 2A schools. There might be a 3A school. I don't foresee that happening for the limited 3A schools we have in the area, but there might be one that sits there and says, well, what do we got to cut to make this work? And that's the biggest thing that we've been harping on for 2-3 years now of there's going to be changes that people are going to be uncomfortable with, but it's to satisfy what the IHSA wants here. And aside from the financial side, it's the whole behind the scenes element.
Yeah, and again, that's not to downplay the official scores. I mean, there are guys and gals that have been doing this for a very long time that are fixtures when we go to games and to see them. And again, it's just kind of the attention is going to shift a little bit on that. And look, there were a couple things that when you think about the shot clock, and I've said this. One, I'm not pro or anti shot clock.
Right.
I agree with you. I don't think it's going to be as big a factor as people think it is. Either way, I don't think that all of a sudden you're going to affect the scores because, I mean, I don't think scoring is down because teams are holding the ball. I think scoring is down because skill level is down.
I agree.
So my addendum to that is if you're going to bring in the shot clock, I wanted to see a reduction of games so that there's more practice time.
Yeah.
I feel like all practice time is geared towards the next game, and we've lost that skill development. And now you're adding a different skill of, hey, this isn't like, we may or may not have an end of the quarter or end of the half possession. You may have a shot clock possession several times during a game.
A lot of schools have, I would say, about 30 games a year, roughly. If you reduce that down to 25, it's not every week. You're going to have some 2-game weeks, but you're going to have just as many, I would say, 1-game weeks. And then you're going to have, of course, your tournaments and everything. But you're going to have, when it's not a tournament week, you're going to have just as many 1-game weeks as you're going to have 2-game weeks that, you're going to have some crunch time, and those are going to be the times when the coach sits there and says, this is going to be like playoffs. We have 2-3 games a week during postseason. But when you don't have those weeks, it can really sit there and say, okay, we got to open the book up here, and this is one of our problems here. And that would be great because we have a lot of good coaches in the area that just don't have the opportunity to develop because they got a game plan constantly. And if you do want to develop, you have to sit there and say, okay, well, I want to give the kids a rest day, but we really need to work on our inside game. We need to work on our rebounding. We need to work on our fast breaks, something like that. And they have to go from, do I want to give them a rest? And I hear plenty of people sit there and say, well, they're 14, 15, 16-year-olds. And I get that. Yeah, they should have the energy. But at the same time, man, they deserve a Saturday every once in a while at the same time to just go home, relax, recuperate a little bit, and spend time with their family, So it's a tough, fine line to walk. But if you reduced it by 5 games, you'd see, even with or without the shot clock, you'd see things just explode in the talent level around the whole state.
Yeah, and again, I think too often you can look at a schedule and you're like, why are they playing that game? That's just a game to be playing a game. And but the other part I would have liked to have seen, and yes, they did make the announcement a while back that, hey, the shot clock is coming. But I would have liked to have seen a 2-year plan of implementation. And look, this first year, it's not mandatory, but understand that in the postseason, we are going to play with the shot clock.
Yeah.
So now you've got to figure out how you're going to get there. Now, if you're fine with playing this a certain way, but understand that when we get to postseason, we're going to play with a shot clock. And in the 27-28 season, it is going to be mandatory throughout. And I just feel like you've got so many schools that are now having to install the shot clocks. I mean, I don't even know what the supply demand out there. And the other thing I would have liked to seen, and if there is this, then I'm just not aware of it, is, I would have liked to seen, the IHSA did a thing with the controversial NFHS stuff where the schools got a discount if they did stuff. Well, I mean, hopefully they've got some sort of deal worked out with the shot clock people.
I hope so.
That, hey, if you're putting this in, but, if you're the shot clock people, you're like, hey, I've got a product. You need the product.
Right.
Why should I give you a discount?
Right, exactly. And the few schools that I've talked to about it, and I've asked, who's providing it, I think I've heard one or two names. And I couldn't tell you off the top of my head the names of it, but there's one that I know I've heard, and I could have sworn early on I heard a different name. And so there's options out there, and it's what fits your need type of deal. But again, as we've been saying, these things are not cheap, and it's not easy to just go through the budget and say how is there room for this. There's something probably getting cut, or somebody's making a donation, or one thing or another. And so it's going to be tough. But yeah, an implementation of we're starting it this year, but it's not necessarily required, would have been good. And for anyone that might be kind of on we're still waiting to we're on the list, we're just waiting for them to make their way out here. That's a situation also where you sit there and say, that might help some teams also, in that, okay, first of all, you don't have to basically give up a home game. You can still play your home game if you don't have it ready at the start of the season, but that it will hopefully by the end of the season everyone will have it. I think that would be an excellent kind of compromise there. And we've talked about it both, I think, on the podcast and off the podcast, just about the fact that if you're going to require someone to do something, then you probably should be maybe assisting a little bit as well. But
in government, they call those unfunded mandates,
right?
So that's kind of where we are with that. And again, I think that's a decision that you make conference by conference.
Yeah.
And hey, everybody in the South Egyptian Conference, hey, we've got some schools that don't have it. Our conference games are not going to be going to be. But understand that if you go on the road to somebody out of conference and they have the shot clock, you're probably going to have to play it. And and so anyway, and that's again, hindsight what it is. And last thing shot clock related is, I'm interested the fact that this summer, when we have a lot of these events and all that, not a lot of them are using it.
Right.
And some of it's logistics, because when you're not playing on the main court, if you're playing two courts instead of one, if you're playing in multiple gyms, that can be an issue. But to me, it feels like, hey, we've got to get accustomed to this in game settings.
Yeah.
And what better opportunity is it during these summer leagues and stuff.
Right. And I mean, the summer leagues and the shootouts and everything that we're seeing right now, a lot of coaches want to treat it as this is just as serious. This is what we're going to see. And so again, like you said, there's logistics. I mean, you talk about, there being two courts. I mean, Benton has 4 or 5 courts.
Well, I think and they're using out at the grade school too.
Exactly.
And so when you're doing multiple there, and so you're looking at, just like what we were talking about, the problems of running it during the season is like you got to have an extra person on the bench. Well, now you've got to have 6 people to run the clock for these events. But I just found it interesting, and not necessarily being critical, but it's like these are the game type opportunities in those unofficial situations, and not everybody is choosing to do that.
Right. Yeah. And like I said, I think you should. It's not like it's going to give you an advantage. One team's going to have an advantage, because we didn't use it. Because while these games matter, they don't count towards a record or anything like that. So it's just practice, As,
talking about practice.
Right, exactly. As the great Allen Iverson said, we're talking about practice. But it's an important bit of practice as you're coming up on an important season for all of IHSA basketball. Of this is the new reality, and if you're not used to it, I'd rather it happen here than your first time seeing one is in an official game. I look back at the first time that I did a Murfreesboro game one, and I'd seen shot clock plenty of times doing Logan basketball, and it was perfectly fine for me. But a lot of the kids on the floor, I could tell it was a factor for them. And again, it's not going to affect play a lot of ways that people. But your first time playing with a shot clock it's not jarring, but it's a different thing that all of a sudden, hey, I used to have a full minute if I wanted to figure this thing out, and to cut that in half, or I've seen possessions that go longer than a minute, and
Right.
just the fact that, okay, I have 35 seconds. What can I do to make this play work? Whether you have the ball or not, it's a change, and you'd rather it be in a practice setting and I'm sure they'll practice with it in their own practices.
Sure.
But you'd like with these games that they're not necessarily practice, but it'd be a good way to practice in a serious setting. You'd like to be able for your first experience to be now and not when you're vying for it may be game 1 of the season, but you're still vying for a chance to make it to the state championship a few months down the way. You'd like it to not be the reason why you start the season out 0-1 because your team just was not ready yet.
Right. And look, once we get around to the basketball season come
we'll
November, this will be a topic that comes up again, but felt appropriate to talk about with the summer stuff, and of course the IHSA information coming out here last week. So last thing we want to talk about today is the big news. We're going to jump to the college ranks. The big news coming out of the Missouri Valley Conference is the changes to Arch Madness, and the women's tournament now will be in St. Louis. It's going to be at the same time. Other changes are 10 of the 11 teams are going to make it instead of all the teams making the postseason tournament. And then the big functionality of the tournament is the top 2 seeds are going to get a bye to the semis, and so then that sets up your games looking different. As a bracket guy, it's real hard for me to see 3 playing 10. That's not supposed to that's not supposed to be the way it works, but that's the way it's going to work. And again, the idea being we're going to protect our top 2 seeds to have a better shot at winning the tournament, which ultimately would give us a better shot of winning in the NCAA tournament, which at the end of all decisions is about more money.
Right.
And the flip side of that is it comes on the heels of Belmont being the number 1 seed and losing to 9th seeded Drake in the quarterfinals. And and then the flip side of this is they're trying to work the women's tournament in at the same time. And so let's just start with your reaction to when you heard the news, and then we'll kind of move from there.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing, as you mentioned, was the protecting the top 2 seeds. I think the logic is there. I can follow the logic, but because not only do you want to improve your chances of potentially going as far as you can in the NCAA tournament, but you want to also improve your chances of having as many teams as possible as well by protecting them to get to the semifinals immediately. You like your chances better if you have 2 good teams. Sometimes you're sitting there saying for the Valley, this might be a 2-bid league if you can have them fighting for it in the championship game like they're hoping by protecting them. There's a much better chance of that happening rather than, well, one of them fell in the semifinal, the other one made it, but it's a different situation obviously, but it just still kind of dilutes it just a little bit because but I mean a lot of conference tournaments have done this already, so you kind of have to go the way of what is working for everybody else. You got to try to catch up to a power conference. The women's tournament, great. I think it's great. They're gonna kind of give a better spotlight, I think, to the women's game, which is important because the Valley Women's Basketball League is actually very good. I know here in Southern Illinois, it's been a minute since SIU women have really been competitive at that top level, but they've been marching towards that level. They were much more kind of in the middle of the pack there at the end of the season last year, which was great to see. So a chance for a year or 2 down the road to really be in the spotlight at Arch Madness is great. But we were talking about it before we turned on the camera here, but just it really feels like excluding just your bottom team. That's the one thing that it's just kind of whoop-de-doo. It doesn't hold the weight that it would if you excluded more. If you're gonna make the regular season matter, you might as well make it matter and not just say, well, the bottom team is out. That's a shame, but at the same time, it doesn't. At that point, they're all kind of like, yeah, please make it end. And so if you really made it matter and And I think you said, maybe make it top 8. That
right.
Okay, now you're talking about a team like a Drake that, okay, well, we might have been able to pull off an upset because we did a few years ago as a 9 seed,
right?
But now we're out.
We didn't make it.
Exactly. So I think because you do have a lot of years where you'll see your bottom quarter in this situation, your bottom 3 that are going to sit there. At least one of them in there probably shouldn't be at that bottom. They had a slow start to the conference race. They're just having an off year one way or another, but they have good players. One that can definitely be kind of the dark horse it's sitting in that kind of 6 to 9 range, and now you remove one of those teams, but it makes you make the regular season really matter a whole lot. That if you're gonna do it, you might as well go the full 9 yards. You don't need to just say, well, the bottom team's out. You might as well really put the pressure on the teams that are at the bottom, because that's how you're really gonna make the offseason matter also to those teams. Okay, we didn't make the cut, so how do we make sure that doesn't happen the next season?
Right, and if you're going to sit and make statements like, "Well, we want to make the regular season matter," which is one of the arguments about college football that I have hated from the get-go.
Right.
But if you're going to say that, then look, let's just make it the top 8. And look, the reason why it's not is because of SIU.
Right.
Southern won 3 straight from 93 to 95. They didn't make the tournament in 96. Their attendance goes way down.
Yeah.
And so then the powers that be are like, well, we can't have that. So we got to make sure everybody's there. Now, when you look at, I think there's 2 things working here. Obviously, you have a women's tournament that has struggled.
Yeah.
And much like the IHSA tournaments, where they have combined them all in one weekend, just because attendance has been down, we can't have this 2 facilities.
Right.
I think that's what we're getting here on that.
I just also, no offense to the Quad Cities and everything, I just didn't think it was placed in the right area. Also, putting it in St. Louis is gonna feel bigger, obviously, but it was so. And I'm working from an Illinois viewpoint. Obviously, the Valley expands past the state of Illinois, but it was in such a weird place. If you're gonna put it somewhere, you might as well put it somewhere that matters. And that's no offense to where it was before, but it just felt like it was just in the middle of nowhere, kind of.
Right, and again, you've got, you're gonna have an extra day, and for the women's tournament that they're going to play, theoretically, because the schedules haven't come out. We've seen some mock-ups or whatever. It's like, well, you're going to have the men play on a day and the women play on a day, and then there's going to be men and women. How are they going to schedule that? Is it going to be the 2 women's semis, then the 2 men's? Is it going to be a women's semi, the 2 men, whatever? The men's final is locked into a time slot because of the TV contract, so the women's final will be later in the day. And if you are clearing the arena, before these events, then what have you gained? It's like the IHSA stuff is, if you're clearing the arena, you're going to have small crowds. And so I think one, it eliminates the need for another facility. And I think with the women's tournament and having that, it does make some sense in that regard. But when, look, the men's tournament isn't drawing. And when you look at it, though, you've lost Creighton.
Yeah.
You've lost Wichita State. You've lost Missouri State. Mm-hmm. Those are 3 massive fan bases that all made the trek to St. Louis for the tournament because their teams were usually in the mix. Mm-hmm. And then you take into the fact that Southern's not played, made that run. Illinois State has been up and down.
Yeah.
Bradley has been up and down. Those are now the core schools. Well, now if they're 1 or 2, you're not going to see them until the weekend.
Right.
So now you've eliminated them from being in the mix in the attendance for those first 2 days. And I just, look, anytime there's a change, everybody's going to complain. We just talked about it with the shot clock and, and the free throw rules in high school, things like that. But there seems to be a more unanimous grabbing of pitchforks by the fans,
Yes.
going, what on earth are we doing here? Yeah. You have ruined what has been just a fixture for Missouri Valley teams, even though the teams have changed. You think about Loyola even had great crowds because they were good, but they leave, and so there's another big fan base that would travel to St. Louis and out, and so you're not going to be able to recover that. And this feels like that situation where you've got a business that's making, you can't make cuts to get back to profitability. Right. It sounds good on paper, but at the end of the day, it doesn't work out that way.
No, and we'll see how it goes, but it does feel just, I mean, people have been talking for a long time. The football side of the Valley will be fine, but the rest of it, people have been talking for a couple years now, really ever since Loyola left, but then Missouri State leaves, and that really kind of put everything into hyperspeed a little bit more of how much longer until the conference just kind of collapses upon itself. Now you've got people that are talking about, specifically, I've seen Illinois State pop up a lot about going to another nearby conference, or SIU's been in the mix a few times. I've seen of names of what conference they could go to, and it's a sad state of affairs because it's a conference that I've loved for well over a decade, and I've always said I'll never abandon this conference, and I won't, but it may end up kind of being put on life support sooner than you realize if this doesn't work out. And so just back to the schedules real quick. I know a lot of people are like, well, how's that going to work? The games will be fine. What I'm most curious about is you're adding into the mix, you're taking away one team from both. Okay, that's great. So you're down to 20 teams now, but you were looking at just 11 that needed practice time and facilities. You've just doubled, basically. How are you going to make that work? Now, granted, after Wednesday, you're going to lose, about 5 teams or so, but at the same time, how are they all going to practice? Where's all the facilities? The Enterprise Center only has so much time and so many spaces. That's going to be really interesting how they handle that all as well. It's a whole week affair. It might have to turn into a week and a half affair just for everybody to get there, feel comfortable with everything, figure out where they're practicing. This is going to be a bigger change, again, on the back end than people realize.
And I wasn't crazy about Missouri Valley Conference Commissioner Jeff Jackson's response.
I wasn't either.
When asked about the fan reaction, because when the release came out in the morning, and of course it gave people, and I'm not saying you have to make your judgment or your decision based on what social media is, because again, we know how trends work and people get fired up, and there's a lot of people that aren't even involved and weighing in and this and that, but there are enough people that you can sample,
right?
And people that that are well tuned to what is going on and all of the things. But again, if the overall response is negative, you sitting there and going, well, I don't know because I don't pay attention to social media. And that's one of those things that may be true, but it's very tone deaf, because there are people in the building that are keeping track of social media and going, ooh, this is bad. And again, I think you've got to come out with a, hey, look, here's the deal.
Yeah.
We have some issues financially with the tournament. The attendance has been down, and we're looking to be able to consolidate these tournaments to give everybody the best possible experience in a way that we can do it in a fiscally responsible manner. Give it a chance. Give it a chance. We're going to evaluate it, and we'll move forward with it accordingly. Sitting there and saying, I don't pay attention to social media, it's just like, peasants, this is the way it's going to be. I don't care what you have to say.
In this day and age, it's impossible not to pay attention to social media. Okay, you may not be as active on it. You may have been in meetings all day and you haven't had a chance to look at it. But like you said, it came out in the morning, so you had lunch at some point in that 5-hour stretch from when it came out and you had that meeting. You can't sit there and tell me that if you didn't, you should have had lunch with somebody and said, have you seen what's going on? Because I haven't had a chance. Right. You should have had a meeting set up on that day with kind of the social media, the PR of the Valley of, okay, I'm not gonna have a chance because I've had this meeting and that meeting. Before I go in, what is the response?
Right.
You have a Zoom setup that you're letting the media in. Before you let the media in, just have a quick 5-minute with everybody. Okay. What's the room temperature right now? What are we walking into?
Well,
here?
It looked worse because they did announce it in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, if you're going to make an announcement, make the announcement, be available then, ask the questions. Now you've made the announcement, you've had opportunity to see the reaction to it, and just to sit there and go, well, I don't pay attention to that. Yeah. I mean, I guess in a perfect world, that's great.
Yeah, sure.
If you're not
15 years ago, it's awesome.
If you're not on social media, and honestly, you probably live a happier life in many regards. But when you're in a position of running an organization or running a business, you can't ignore what the paying customers. Right. And again, I get it. With social media, who knows how many people are actually the paying customers that are weighing in. We know how that goes. But at the end of the day, though, you've got to take the temperature of the room when you're going on stage to talk about it later, after it's already been announced. Yeah. So you have that potential. You do that because it's like, okay, now we can address maybe some of the concerns that are being raised. Well, let's do that. And I didn't feel that happen.
No. And just to, I guess, we don't need to harp on the social media aspect so much, but at the same time, just to show how silly that comment was, the very next day you have the social media of the MVC replying to one of the best fan pages for the Valley out there, saying thank you so much for what you do in terms of social media and helping promote the conference. It's to again, in this day and age, to totally dismiss social media is stupid. It's not the right way to go about it, because you have so many. That's how you reach your fans. It's not like, well, we have TV, we have radio, and that's about it. We have our commercials, and when we see them, we see them. This is how you interact with your fans, and to just sit there and say, well, I don't pay attention to it. Well, that's great, but you have a whole social media department that says otherwise, and maybe you should be talking to them.
We know that there are situations where things get leaked, and just to judge the temperature of the room, hey, let's just throw this spaghetti on the wall and see if it sticks. And it's like, the pitchforks are out. That seems like a bad idea. That's maybe. And again, I don't feel like you can make all your decisions based on what the social media. That's not what we're saying here. But again, you had the opportunity to control the narrative when you know what was out there, and it just it missed. And so now it becomes the challenge of, well, how do we overcome this, the mindset, because again, and I've seen a couple places, and talking about the fact that you're not inviting all the teams is why fans are upset. No, that's not why fans are upset. Mm-hmm. Fans are upset is because, one, they don't like change, and I get it, but Arch Madness has been Arch Madness for all these years, and there is. Look, like we said earlier, there was a time when they expanded beyond 8 teams, and not every team, you had to make the top 8 to get in. Yep. And so they made the change, and so if they make the change back, that's one thing. But again, when you have a situation where your top 2 teams are not playing until the semifinals, well, now your attendance is going to be even lower in my estimation. And because, look, moving the women's tournament there is not going to move that needle. Mm-mm. If Illinois State or Bradley or Southern's 1 or 2, and those teams are not playing till the semifinals, they ain't going to the quarterfinals. No. Why would you?
No.
And so, but if you are one of those teams and you're playing on Friday or Thursday, if it's Thursday through Saturday or Friday through Sunday, whatever the tournament ends up being, but you might go and you stay all day. You buy the all session pass. You're not going to do that. Yeah. And if you're coming to the women's tournament, you're not going to do that because it's on Wednesday and Friday. Now you've turned it into a 5-day deal.
Well, and you would have people that would sit there and say, well, I'm gonna take that week off, or I'm gonna take the latter half. Well, now that you're staggering, if you only have a men's basketball fan or only a women's basketball fan, they're sitting there saying, well, what do I do, first of all, because I don't want to take that day off and that day off. And so maybe they'll come, or maybe they'll say, well, I'll see what they do on the first day if they're playing on the first day. It's a big gamble, and it feels like they took a stab at it. That you have to give them the credit where credit is due, but it feels like they took 3 or 4 stabs when you should have just taken the one. And if you're gonna do something, just do one thing. See how things work out that way. Okay, that worked. That didn't work. We're going back to the other way. But we'll include the thing that we were thinking about the last time. It's too much change all at once that it's a big gamble. And for Valley fans like me, I hope it pays off. I hope it works out. But it does really feel like this is going to be the decision that we look back on in 10 years of, when did the Valley change?
Well, and again, at some point, the realization is that the schools and the conferences such as the Missouri Valley really are just kind of waiting to see how the rest of the NCAA landscape's going to end up falling.
Right.
Missouri State didn't choose to do that. They chose to get into a conference that's all over the country, and by all indications, that seems to have been working for them.
Yep.
But at the other part of that equation is that why are we going to make some massive deals to do these things when in 3 years it all could be a house of cards and we're scrambling to do anything else. And again, you can't make the decisions on it could happen. It's like adjusting things based on a forecast.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, everyone has said with North Dakota State leaving the Valley football that they're going to try their best to stay in that upper region, but the way that college football is going, and so as college football goes, the rest of athletics goes, they're probably going to end up back in the same kind of division as SIU and Illinois State and all that, more than likely, unless they can skyrocket, get themselves on a rocket and end up in a Power 4 conference by the time that day comes. But we all see it on the horizon of the Power 4 saying, no, we're going to take our ball and we're going to go play in this field and all our money and play over in this field. And all the group of fives are going to kind of coalesce with the FCS and make a new league somehow. And so as that goes, the rest of college athletics will go and they'll see, well, Power 4 football did it, so why don't Power 4, Power 5 basketball do it, and so on and so forth. And so you're trying to prepare for the worst, but at the same time, I think you just are looking for stability. And the conference is trying to provide that. But again, I think they took too many stabs at once. They took too many bites of the cake. And I hope it works out, but it does feel like they're going to be kind of sitting there in a year or two being like, well, maybe we bit off more than we could chew.
Well, again, you're looking at situations where you had massive fan bases leave the league, and the teams that replace them don't have great fan bases. Valparaiso, UIC, Belmont, those are not big traveling fan schools. So you're never going to replace and be back to what it was, where it was 20,000 on the attendance on semifinal Saturday.
That's tough to find a replacement right there. I don't know.
So now you've got to adjust, and we've got to make these changes. We've got to make some cost-cutting measures. And if that means we're going to go men's and women's in the same tournament, and we're going to make it 8, that's what you got to do.
Exactly. And you look at, you're never really going to get someone falling back down to a mid-major. Once they're in a power, unless they get booted out, they're there to stay, and so you have to look and see, okay, who's down below that can make us better. But as a conference, you also have to say who's gonna make us richer, at the same time. And I feel like that has not been the focus for about 15 years now. And I mean, kudos to them to trying to make sure that we just make the conference better. But at the same time, now that's how you end up where you're at, where you get a Valpo who, once every blue moon, they're a decent team. Well, and you get a Belmont who is second fiddle in their own hometown and stuff like that,
Well, and it's, again, you got to deal with geography.
Yep.
And, again, that's Missouri State's move. they just took geography out of the equation, which, again, if you get enough TV money from other places that I mean, who cares? I mean, we don't care about our athletes having to, softball having to go to New Mexico or to Delaware, depending on where it is. And, again, that's probably a whole different discussion. Yeah. But again, you're limited to, what teams geographically, and then you're trying to take the best ones that fit with your profile, both academically and athletically. And, so it is a big puzzle piece. And, again, this is where you're at. And so you've got to figure out, okay, well, the revenue's not coming in like it has, well, then we need to make some cost cutting measures. And then, it feels like these changes were made, and it feels like that it may end up costing them more revenue, potentially.
It feels like it's going to cost them more than just more revenue, honestly.
That's we'll have the old wait and see.
Yes, sir.
We're discussing it in June, and that's certainly some new March madness. Well, that's going to do it for this River Radio Sports Central podcast. For Matty V, I'm Darren Kinnard. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.